All right, folks. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to get kicked off. Before we do, let's just take a look at the results that came into the poll for this evening's meeting. We asked people coming into this evening's meeting, what one word or phrase describes your vision for the future of public spaces in Long Island City? Well, I'm impressed to see regional rail hub. Must be coordinated answer across a few people, but it is coming up large in the center here. We're also seeing ideas for accessible public spaces. I also see universal design in there. So hoping that our public space can really be accessible to all members of our community. Human, maybe human scale. I see more bike friendly. I see inclusive, special. So people want to see a space that is really unique to the area. I see people mentioning the resiliency that needs to be built in, the fact that the area is flood prone and that we should be planning for that. And then I see some things that reference actually public, wanting a space that really feels like it's totally open to folks. Everybody, thank you so much for participating in this opening poll. I'm going to take us back now to our opening presentation for a moment and just say, welcome everybody. This is the first round of focus area meetings for the One LIC neighborhood planning process. Welcome to the focus area meeting this evening. We're focusing on climate adaptation and resilience, open space and waterfront access, and transportation and mobility. My name is Bahish Chansey. I'm the Director of Urban Planning at WXY Studio. Our design and planning firm is working with the City Planning Department and Councilmember Julie One's office on this planning process. We're going to get going in a moment this evening, but before we do, I do want to hand it over to a few folks who are helping to bring this whole process together. I'm going to start off this evening handing it over to Alexis Wheeler at the Department of City Planning to share some opening remarks.
Hello, everyone. LIC, thank you so much for being here with us today. We know that you've been giving us a lot of time recently, but we also want to make sure that we are taking every opportunity that we can to really drill into best understanding what all of these issues are and what your future is for Long Island City. Today, we're certainly covering some of the topics that we hear about the most frequently from all of you. So many of you lived through the experience of Superstorm Sandy. We spend every day thinking about what climate change is going to mean for our reality in the future. And so we definitely want to be talking to you about what resiliency can mean, the full breadth and dimensions of how we can address the issues of resiliency and climate change in our community. But also, what are the other components that we need in our day-to-day life? What is it like to move through the city and be able to engage in open space and in all sorts of public realms? What is the relief and opportunity that we can find there? And also, how are we moving around? You know, we have people who get in their cars every day. We also have people that ride their bikes every day. And we have plenty of people that live and work and just rely on their own ambling. So we're definitely excited to hear everything that all of you have to share. And again, this is our ongoing process. I will put out the pitch. We have had a few overtime requests for different types of data. Please share specific requests with us. And during the next round, we're happy to actually bring those to the table and discuss all of those. So if you have any specific requests for data points with respect to the topics that we're talking about or any of the topics covered in the past FAMs, we want to be transparent. We want to be able to talk through what we can talk through. So please feel free to make any of those requests. I do want to really thank the hard work of WXY and all of our city agencies here. But most of all, I really want to give a big round of applause to our council member, Julie One, who is a fantastic partner and champion for all of you. Without her leadership, we really, we may not be quite as all together and engaged here today. So it's really fantastic that she's here and able to continually set a really productive stage for all of us. So looking forward to everyone sharing tonight, and I'll hand it back to Bahish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Before we get going, I'm also going to introduce Isaac Blassenstein, the Director of Land Use at the Office of Councilmember Julie One, to open up with some welcome remarks.
Hey folks, the council member is having some technical issues. So I just wanted to make sure I came on and let you know we're so thankful that you're all here, that you've already taken, many of you, many familiar faces, time over the weekend and a few weeks ago to come out on other issues. We're really excited to talk about the topics tonight and hear your thoughts.
Isaac, I think the council member just joined. I don't want to put her on the spot if it's too early, but Julie, if you're here with us now, you're welcome to address folks and give a few welcoming remarks.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm in transit in between meetings, and I think Isaac was doing an amazing job. So I'm going to let Isaac finish, but we're so thankful that you're here. We're so glad that you're engaged. We want to make sure that you remember that this is going to be a marathon. Unlike traditional ULERP, which is about 30 days for community input, we're going to be doing this for over a year. So we're going to have multiple focus area meetings this year and next year. So we hope you will continue to stay with us, and I'll turn it back over to Isaac to finish. Thank you.
Yeah, the council member really said it, but so thankful you're here. And I just really want to shout out the Department of City Planning, WXY, many of the folks on this call. They've been doing such an amazing job over the last year. Please, folks, our office is always open to you. Contact us about this or any other issue. And thank you for being here tonight. And I'll be listening in. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Isaac. All right, let's get going to the meeting then. One moment while I reshare my screen. And once again, welcome to this evening's focus area meeting. We are very glad that you all joined us this evening. We're also really excited to get into the main portion of the evening's meeting, which is discussion with you all. I'm going to kick us off with a brief project overview about the planning process and explain a little bit more about why we're here. Before we get into all that, though, I do want to note interpretation services are available at this evening's meeting. We have interpretation available in Spanish, Mandarin, and Bengali. To switch the language you hear, please click the globe icon in the Zoom menu bar. And I am going to invite our interpreters to share that announcement to the full room if we can close the channels for a moment before we bring those back up.
Se ve en la parte inferior de su pantalla para ser
Interpreters, if you could please pause one moment. We're hearing all at once, so if you could please start with the Spanish announcement.
Por favor, se selecciona el icono en el globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla para servicios de traducción.
Thank you. Can we please have the Mandarin announcement?
各位社区人士，大家好。我今天晚上的活动呢是有翻译服务的，请选择屏幕底部的地球图标，以获取中文、华语翻译服务。谢谢 ，Thank you.
And I'll invite the Bengali interpreter to please share the same.
শুভ সন্ধ্যা। আপনাদের যদি বাংলা ভাষায় কোনো হেল্প লাগে, এই যে আইকন দেখতেছেন ওইটাতে আপনারা প্রেস করবেন, তাহলে বাংলা আমরা আপনাদেরকে হেল্প করতে পারবো। ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you very much to all our interpreters for being here with us this evening too. Give us a moment while we set the interpretation channels back up, and those will be going as we go through the remainder of this evening's presentation. All right, now a little bit about what we'll discuss this evening. This evening's meeting will include an overview of the day's objectives, as well as information about the One LIC planning process. We'll review a little bit of what we heard at the kickoff meeting as it relates to this evening's topics. And then we'll break out into a couple of live polling questions. We'll then come back and share some specific information about the tools that the city has to address today's topics in this study area. And then the largest portion of the meeting is reserved for breakout room discussions, where we will be asking you to do two things with us. First, we'll ask you to workshop the issues and opportunities that we heard at the kickoff meeting. And secondly, we'll ask that we work together to define a set of community goals that will help us advance this plan for the topics that we're here discussing this evening. At today's meeting, you will be able to select whichever breakout room topic you would like to discuss. You'll also be able to visit multiple topics of interest to you if you wish. So a little more about this evening's meeting. We have 4 key goals. First off, we want to share what we heard about these topics at the kickoff meeting. We want to present some existing conditions related to these topics, as well as the tools that are in the city's toolkit to address them. And then, like I said, in breakout rooms, we'll work to workshop those issues and opportunities and come to a set of community-defined goals. So first off, what is this planning process? One LIC is a holistic community planning process that seeks to gain input and build consensus on key neighborhood challenges and opportunities towards the development of a Long Island City neighborhood plan. It's very important that the LIC neighborhood plan is not just a proposal for land use changes. Holistic community planning includes understanding how proposed land use changes may affect Long Island City and ensuring that a complementary and timely set of investments in infrastructure, community services, and city policies supports sustainable growth and strengthens the community for everyone. Let's now take a look at the geography that we're talking about. The preliminary study area outlined here represents the area that the City Planning Department is considering for land use changes. The bulk of the area is between the 59th Street Bridge and Annabelle Basin, from the East River on the west to 24th Street on the east. It includes a few blocks south to 47th Avenue between 5th Street and 11th Street, and a few blocks north of the Queensboro Bridge to 39th Avenue between 21st Street and 23rd Streets. This gray dotted surrounding area is what we're calling the context area. This area would not be under consideration for land use changes, but it's important to account for this immediate context in our planning effort. Investments in infrastructure, facilities, and services may also happen in the full context area to support changes that may happen in the study area. The study area includes a large portion of the LIC Industrial Business Zone, the IBZ. The IBZ has great opportunities to support job growth and workforce development in this plan and can adapt to meet the needs of today's economy and the area's growing businesses. There's also a wealth of small businesses and manufacturers who work alongside the artists and cultural facilities in this area. These folks may also stand to benefit from city investments, and the city needs to allow for and support their growth. Although the study area is along the East River, there is currently no public waterfront access. This is an opportunity to rethink how LIC meets the water. There are incredible opportunities to connect Gantry Plaza State Park to the south with Queensbridge Park to the north and create continuous waterfront access. This is also the time to plan for coastal resilience and adaptive infrastructure that prepares us to live with the impacts of climate change, all of which we'll be speaking about in more detail tonight. There are some opportunities in this area for new housing, and a neighborhood rezoning allows us to mandate that every new development includes some affordable housing. And finally, investments in transportation and climate infrastructure, street safety and open space, and city services and education will ensure that the community is ready to sustain job and residential growth. The city and council member 1 understand this opportunity as understand this plan as an opportunity to generate a significant amount of new housing, including affordable housing, to deliver new, high-quality open space along the waterfront and in the neighborhood's core, to enhance connectivity and multimodal transportation options, to plan for infrastructure and resiliency, to increase the number of jobs and expand workforce training, to invest in neighborhood services, education, and programs, and to lead through an equitable and inclusive process. Now, let me emphasize that these goals represent preliminary draft goals. Part of what we're doing together today at this meeting is to create more specific and actionable goals for today's topics that will guide the community plan's recommendations as we advance. At the kickoff meeting, some of what we heard reinforced these draft goals, but we also heard a lot of other good ideas. At this first round of focus area meetings, we're going to be developing a stronger set of goals to advance the work. There are multiple ways to engage in this planning process. Broad outreach events will help us meet people where they are. We are popping up at community events around the neighborhood to bring more people into this discussion. Town halls are places that we share major updates and seek community feedback on the plan. Focus area meetings, like the place we are today, are discussion-based, concentrated public work sessions where we can tackle specific topic areas that relate to the planning work. And finally, the plan's website is licplan.nyc. This is the place that you can find all past documents and see what we've heard to date. We upload things there like these presentation decks and these meeting recordings, and we also upload documents about what we've heard at these meetings. We encourage everybody to please join the mailing list there to stay informed about the planning process. We'll be announcing the next set of upcoming meetings in this process very soon there, and that is the place to go to stay informed about where and when they'll be. And we look forward to doing those in person with you all. Today's focus area meeting is about 3 topics: climate adaptation and resilience, the public realm and open space, including waterfront access, and transportation and mobility. In discussion, we'll be talking through the ways that the city can support these different topics, ensure that we're planning for climate change, and ensure that the way we get around this area really supports the residents and workers who are here. In the first focus area meeting, we covered housing. That meeting was on December 6th. And in the most recent focus area meeting over the weekend on Saturday, we discussed the topics of economic development, arts and culture, and community resources. A look now at our timeline for this part of the process. We came out of the planning meeting with a lot of issues and opportunities that the public hopes to see addressed in the plan. Coming into this first round of focus area meetings, we are building on what we heard then, and we seek to finalize the plan's goals. Each of the focus area meetings includes 3 individual meetings. Each of the rounds includes 3 meetings covering these different topics like tonight. We'll take the finalized plan goals from the first round of focus area meetings into round 2, where we'll finalize a set of issues and opportunities to address in the community plan. In round 2, we'll also workshop some potential solutions and community recommendations to include. At Town Hall 2, we're going to come back to the public with a set of draft community recommendations based on those goals, issues, and opportunities defined up till that point. We'll use that public forum to refine those recommendations and bring updates back to the public in the 3rd round of focus area meetings. In that 3rd round, we'll further workshop community recommendations and then share high-level draft zoning framework that would be used to develop the draft plan. At Town Hall 3, we'll present the draft plan and the draft zoning framework to the community for feedback before the plan is finalized and moves into the environmental review scoping process. Now let's discuss a bit of what we heard about these topics at the kickoff meeting. First, thank you to everybody who was able to join us at the kickoff event. We had a wonderful evening with over 220 attendees and representatives from over 15 city agencies. Across 10 topic-based stations, we received over 1,000 comments. Synthesizing everything that we heard in these meetings and through people's conversations and through their written feedback is the key purpose of this type of public engagement work. We listen so that what we're able to put into the community plan can reflect what we're hearing from the community. To begin that synthesis, we take all the staff's written note, every post-it, every sticker upvote that we received, and we record them in a categorized system. It is the content and the individual ideas of each note that we use most directly in community planning recommendations, but it's also helpful for us to group these comments into topics and themes so that we can get a larger read on what was said. The comments were sorted into the categories that are listed here. The full What We Heard summary document is available on the plan's website, licplan.nyc. And today we'll review a bit of what we heard as it relates to today's focus areas. While we show the number of comments that were received for each issue and opportunity, keep in mind those aren't votes. An issue with a lot of comments is not necessarily more important than those that just have a few. Starting off with climate adaptation and resiliency. This is an issue of consistent concern from kickoff meeting participants. Although the kickoff included a dedicated station for climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience, we received intersectional climate comments across all the topic areas. People want to see climate adaptation and resilience integrated throughout every part of the plan. Given the area's shoreline and its persistent flooding issues, we heard a lot of interest in green and blue infrastructure options, things like rain gardens and green and blue roofs to help manage stormwater. We also heard from participants who are excited about the potential for new buildings to serve as climate-strong assets, with far higher energy efficiency requirements and stormwater management and resilience built into new development. Others were concerned about the embodied carbon that would be built into any new buildings and hoped for adaptive reuse where possible. Some people also called not to densify the areas that were closest to the water. While we heard hopes for interagency and partner-based collaborative solutions to the climate crisis, we also heard a lot of concerns about flooding and combined sewage overflow. We also heard about extreme heat and air quality concerns from folks in the room. When it comes to getting around LIC, transit investments and safer streets were key concerns. Kickoff participants hoped to see investment in more frequent and reliable 7, E, and G train service. People also shared their concerns about station capacity and a lack of accessibility at the Vernon-Jackson stop. People saw opportunities to more deeply integrate maritime transportation options for goods and for people into a newly activated shoreline. And we heard from people who experienced dangerous street conditions walking and biking. We want to see investments in traffic calming and more street designs that center safety. We heard suggestions for pedestrian connectivity improvements like better links from the study area to Queensbridge houses beneath the 59th Street Bridge. Around the public realm and open space, outside of calls for affordable housing, the need for more green, open, and playground space was one of the most highly sought after community improvements. Many families in the area look for space for their kids to play, and it's top of mind for people. We also heard from participants who want to see improvements to shared spaces in the Queensbridge Houses campus. People who we spoke to saw the waterfront in this area as a major gap to public waterfront access and were excited about the idea of new parkland that may link the parks to the north and south. There were a lot of ideas about what we may include in parks, and we heard from people who want basketball courts, boathouses, river access, space for programs and entertainment, and suggestions for public art and cultural amenities in those open spaces. As people thought through the area's streets, we heard from people who want to see greater pedestrianization and expansion of open streets. We also heard from businesses who want to see shipping and delivery better thought out at the curbside. And again, street safety was a key concern here, with folks mentioning dangerous crossings and issues like sidewalk parked cars that are difficult to navigate around. We're going to take a brief break here, and we're going to go back to our polling. Folks, we'll ask you to join this Mentimeter poll if you're able to. If you're not able to, you also may respond in the chat. You can join the poll by scanning the QR code that's on screen with your smartphone. Or if you prefer to use this in a browser, you can go to your browser and in the URL bar type menti.com, MENTI.com, and enter the code that's on screen to get to this poll. You can get there at the code 48214783. And again, I'll give folks a minute to get into this poll together, and then we'll start to show the results on screen and talk through some of them before we get into details about this evening's focus areas. You can get there at menti.com, enter the code 48214783. I feel like Brian Lehrer. All right. Moon, if you want to take up and start to show our poll results, we'll start to see what's coming in as answers. Okay, thank you very much, Moon. So again, we'll give folks a minute more to join here. The code to access this poll is still on screen at the top, 48214783. You can get there at menti.com. Hope to join you, please. We hope you join us there. There's also the link to the poll available in the meeting chat if that's the easiest way to access it. So this first polling question asks meeting participants what climate solutions you all think are most important for this area. I'll preface this with the caveat that all of these solutions may be very important to this area. We're asking folks to please select their top 3 to get a little bit of prioritization on the table as we start in. All right, I'm going to start to read out our results as it looks like the number of responses coming in is starting to slow. All right, very highly on this poll, we see sewer improvements ranked. Maybe top of mind for folks with all the rain we got last night and this morning, but we saw some pretty serious flooding in LIC and other parts of the city. And so sewer improvements, expansion to its capacity is probably of a top concern for folks. Similarly, the other higher up answers, although nothing really competes on this page with sewer improvements, are rain gardens and bioswales and coastal flooding barriers. So people, again, thinking about the impacts of water on the neighborhood. We have a pretty close lineup between, I'm going to read left to right here, building efficiency improvements, increased tree canopy, renewable power generation and storage, and soft shorelines, stormwater retention tanks coming in close after those, and then green and blue roofs also featuring on this poll. I'm not in the meeting chat seeing any other options put in, but if folks did select other and you wish to let us know what's on your mind, please do put in the meeting chat what you're thinking about when you said other. Public transportation is a climate solution. Thank you very much, Anthony. All right, folks, we're going to move on to our second polling question here, and on your own polling window, it should update as we advance the slide. All right, our second polling question asks you to please rank the following park and open space issues that you think best reflect the conditions in the neighborhood. We have issues on the page like parks are hard to reach or access, issues like we are not benefiting from the full suite of sustainability and resilience benefits that may come from open space and green space. Activity options may be too limited. There's not enough open space, or there's not waterfront access. We are starting to see the votes come in, and I'm sure we'll see a big mass of them come in all at once as people register these options and start to rank in our poll. I'm sure there's other issues around accessing open space and parks in this area. If you have other ideas that you want to make sure are included in our work here, please do also put those in the Zoom chat. All right, we are starting to get to the critical mass of folks answering the second ranked choice polling question. This is great practice for ranked choice elections. They're coming up next year. All right, up top, number one, we have there is just not enough open space. People feel that there's too little open space in the area to serve the full number of residents and workers who are here. Number two, we have open spaces are hard to reach or access. I can imagine if you're on the far side of the neighborhood, getting to park space as high quality as it may be along the waterfront is a little too high of an ask. Open spaces are not benefiting from sustainability and resilience enough. I may have reworded that question a little bit, but we're not maybe seeing the full ecosystem services that we hope to see from open space. There's not enough waterfront access, ranking number 4, and the activity options are too limited. Is the lowest ranked option of the issues that afflict open space and the issue of open space in the project area today. All right, thank you everybody for participating in that second question. And Moon, can we please advance to our third and final polling question of this segment? Our final question of this segment asks, what would make getting in and around Long Island City more convenient for you? There's a few options on the table. Ranging from things like less traffic, to more bike lanes, more city bike stations. Again, we understand that most of us probably want all of these. Please choose your top 3, and together we can see where there's some consensus around this. We'll give folks another couple of seconds to get their answers in as they make their way through the different options here. Thanks, folks who are writing in others to the chat. I see accessible 7 trains at the Vernon Jackson stop. I see not new train lines or stations. Pedestrian-friendly streetscape. Jackson Avenue bus line. Thanks, folks, for sharing those out in the chat. And we are starting to see the number of votes come in here. All right, so I'm going to start to read out our polling results that are still coming in. So as top ranked and tied options, we have improved curbside management. Very wonky answer, Long Island City. Interesting. And more frequent subway service. All right, right behind that, we also have more pedestrian-only routes. With 13 votes, we have more bike paths and greenways. At 13, we have more frequent bus service. Tied, or not tied, but close with 10, 9, and 8 votes respectively are less traffic, new bus stops, different routes, and more parking. And then ranking lowest on our poll here is more city bike stations. A few folks voted for other and wrote those answers in. And no one across the board who was at this meeting is interested in taxi, Uber, and Lyft pickup and drop-off zones. Maybe that's included in curbside management, but understood. That can include a lot. All right, thank you very much, folks, for voting in these polls and starting to think through some of the issues that we'll be talking through in discussion groups in a couple of minutes. Moon, I am going to take the screen share back and we can get into the remainder of the presentation before we get into breakout rooms. So folks, thanks again for participating in that poll. We are now going to discuss our topic areas in a little bit more detail. Climate infrastructure, transportation, and open space are each major topics in their own right. We are not going to be able to share everything about them, nor do you all want to hear me talk all evening. Our time together is much better spent hearing from you in discussion. So before we jump into groups, we'll just give a cursory overview of some of the topics that we ask folks to keep in mind as you break out into discussion. We'll share some key points as well as some discussion questions to frame some of this planning work. And we really hope that you will help us expand that conversation. Please remember, you're not limited to the things we're putting before you. We're just doing this to start to get your mental juices flowing as we get into discussion. So starting off with climate adaptation and resilience. These topics are intersectional and will affect our planning work across topics. A few core concerns that came up and that may come up in the breakout rooms are things like energy efficiency, improvements to the area's power generation and storage infrastructure, strategies to manage coastal flooding and inland floods caused by stormwater, the strengths of natural solutions to address issues like heat, flooding, and air quality are a few of the things that we've heard so far, and we'd love to hear more detail about what you want to see in the area as we go into our discussion. So on the heels of the UN climate crisis, it should be news to no one that we are in an escalating climate crisis. The city is facing more frequent and more intense environmental conditions. Flooding, extreme heat, and air quality crises are all becoming a more regular part of life. This is top of mind for the people we've heard from so far. With combined sewer overflow affecting Newtown Creek, we've heard calls for investments in sewer infrastructure and rainwater retention, as well as natural flood mitigation strategies like soft shorelines. We heard from folks who want to ensure that new homes and business space is prioritized in areas that are less likely to flood. Participants concerned with environmental determinants of public health raised the alert about indoor air quality, and people highlighted the link between greenery, trees, and local microclimates. So looking at existing conditions, a large part of Long Island City is low-lying and vulnerable to coastal flooding from the East River and Newtown Creek. Whatever development is allowed in the area in the future must take this into consideration and design for resilience against floods and stormwater. As we look at flood risks projected into the future, this danger becomes much more prevalent across larger parts of the area as sea levels continue to rise. In addition to flood risks along the shore, changes in elevation leave some streets vulnerable to flooding from stormwater, as we saw last night and into this morning. Since our sewer system relies heavily on gravity to move water, this pooling effect is exacerbated at low points in the street network where we see the sewer that can't take more water in. Extreme heat is also a challenge in warmer months. We see that areas nearer to water bodies, as well as areas that have greater amounts of greenery and tree cover, provide a respite from rising temperatures. Industrial areas with large amounts of concrete and impervious surfaces can also make flooding, and extreme heat worse. So the city is developing a stronger toolkit to address the impacts and causes of climate change. These solutions are broadly grouped into two buckets. The first, climate adaptation and resilience, what we do to change our built environment so that impacts are less severe and we can recover more quickly. This includes strategies like flood mitigation, investments in sewer infrastructure, and natural solutions like soft shorelines. The other bucket is climate mitigation. This is investments in strategies that reduce our reliance on carbon-based fuels and those that recapture carbon. This includes things like solar and wind power generation, building energy efficiency, and options to sequester carbon in things like trees and soil. Let's explore a few more of the city's tools to start to get at these strategies. Under zoning for coastal resiliency, New York has a toolkit of parts that the planning department considers for areas at risk of coastal flooding. Its 4 component parts include 1, on the far left, protection at the coast through elevated barriers and natural solutions like marshes that blunt the impact of coastal floodwaters. 2, adapting our buildings for water events, ensuring that they're built to withstand floods and that critical building systems like boilers and HVAC systems are not in vulnerable places at the ground level or in the basement of buildings. 3, protecting infrastructure from climate hazards through hardening techniques or simply raising it above sea levels in some places. And 4, working with residents and businesses to put plans and resources for flood events in place. One example of where these strategies are put to use is along the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn. There, new developments have been built with an elevated shoreline, and accompanying walkways serve the public as open space in good weather, and they serve as protection in flood events. These rules are often codified in waterfront access plans, which we'll speak to in a bit. So no one strategy can deal with increased flooding entirely. The city employs a set of complementary tools in doing so. That set of tools includes things like sewer buildouts and preventative maintenance to ensure that our sewer system has the capacity to receive some of this storm water. Keep in mind, during high stormwater events, it will not be possible to build the sewers large enough to capture all the water. Capital investments designed to tackle rainwater directly with tools like rain gardens, bioswales, and blue belts help us make a larger dent there. Blue belts are green areas that are designed to flood intentionally and naturally filter water. And the city has a new unified stormwater rule. The unified stormwater rule is a new policy as of last year that expands the Department of Environmental Protection's oversight of rainwater management in new developments. The rule prioritizes rainwater retention on site and sets standards for the flow and water quality that's coming out of new developments. It also allows for a wider variety of both concrete and vegetative rainwater retention solutions. If you're interested in this topic, I really encourage you to look up the Unified Stormwater Rule. One example of strategies used to curb the amount of rainwater going directly into sewers is from the newly renovated schoolyard at PS 111, the Jacob Blackwell School. Here, the city installed new permeable surfaces that are designed to capture rainwater, and they feed into a subsurface water retention tank that can hold up to 1 million gallons. The water that goes into that tank would otherwise overwhelm the sewer system and cause flooding during storms. After it goes into that tank, it can be held and more slowly released to water treatment facilities when there is not an emergency or large rainwater event. Another tool in the city's toolkit to addressing climate change comes in the form of new tools under the Zoning for Carbon Neutrality package that's been recently approved. These include new allowances and new ways to make it easier to install wind and solar power generation on buildings, as well as battery storage. They include tools for improvements to building energy efficiency, regulations that require more EV charging and vehicular parking that has to be built into buildings and better micromobility integration, and regulations that are designed to improve composting and waste handling in buildings. So a few key questions to keep in mind around the topic of climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. Where do you see the potential for climate smart infrastructure in this area? Where in Long Island City is flooding the worst today? Where would you like to see green infrastructure, natural and vegetative solutions, and where do you think gray infrastructure works best? And by that, I mean human-made solutions like retention tanks. Keep these questions in mind. We're going to be breaking out in a few minutes to discussion rooms where we'll ask you to share your ideas with us. Now we'll shift gears and highlight a few points on mobility to inform our breakout room discussion there. A community plan is an opportunity to rethink holistically the universe of transportation options in the area. We can also set the course for projects that will improve accessibility, mobility, and safety. First, taking a look at how people get around today. The significant majority of local residents, 68%, commute to work or school on public transit, mass transit. That makes it an essential point of focus in our investments. The next largest group, 15%, work from home and add to the neighborhood's daytime and evening street activity. 9% of people either drive alone to work or carpool, and 2% of residents in the area walk to work. 5% use means other than that, and that may include things like biking. The study area, which is mostly industrial and commercial, perhaps unsurprisingly, draws more workers in than it sends out to work each day. Of those who come here to work, 29% live somewhere else in Queens. When we asked people about transportation at the kickoff session, we got many great ideas. Participants wanted to see integration with regional rail networks like Amtrak, Metro North, and the LIRR. People saw opportunities for better uses of the spaces that are beneath our transportation infrastructure. Think about all that space beneath the trusses of the Queensboro Bridge. People also saw calls for protected bike lanes and calls to make cycling in the area safer. There were also hopes for pedestrian priority streets and safety improvements at crossings. NYC streets can be dangerous and they can even be deadly. Many of us have been personally affected or know someone who has been injured or killed in traffic violence. When we look at vehicle crash data that's been recorded by the NYPD, we see the most crashes in this area along large arterial roadways like Queens Plaza and Jackson Avenue. South of Sunnyside Yards, Queens Boulevard, and Van Dam Street at LaGuardia College are also high crash corridors. 2 Department of Transportation Vision Zero priority corridors intersect the study area. One is Queens Plaza, and the other is 21st Street. There's also a few priority intersections in and around the study area. They include the intersection of 21st Street and Queens Plaza North, the intersection at Jackson Avenue and 23rd Street, and the one at Queens Plaza and 27th Street. The Department of Transportation is focusing safety improvements and investments in these critical locations. The Department of Transportation also has a toolkit of traffic calming and street safety elements that it uses to try to make New York City streets safer. They include things like bicycle infrastructure and things like time of day management on streets. There's also amenities that make streets more comfortable and safe to be along, like street furniture or planters and blocks. These can both make a street more beautiful, also make it more pleasant to be on, and they can also serve as protection from traffic from coming up onto the sidewalk. Other tools like shared streets or the city's more recent Open Streets program are other methods that the city can use in order to promote safer streets, improved pedestrian connectivity, and improved bike connectivity. As we've seen, public transit is an essential piece in the local transportation puzzle. Access to reliable transit is essential for local residents, and it makes the neighborhood a more attractive destination for workers as well. We have heard a good deal of concern about subway reliability and crowding, and we encourage you to share your hopes for the future of the system in our discussion. We've also heard comments about calls for additional bus service into Blissville, as well as calls for other improvements to bus service in the area. The Western Queens Greenway is part of a citywide network of low-stress and physically separated bike and micromobility greenways. The route is a critical north-south link along the waterfront for bike transportation and other small personal modes. There are currently plans underway to improve the route, and we also encourage you to share your hopes for the Greenway or your concerns with it and its connections to the neighborhood and to other bike infrastructure in the area as we get into our discussions. And again, a few things to keep in mind as we go into breakout discussion rooms. We want to understand where you experience the greatest challenges or dangers to personal mobility in the area. How do you like to get around? And how do folks you know in the area also get around? What challenges are they seeing? What opportunities do you see for multimodal infrastructure like bike paths or open streets? What do you want to see of curbside management in the area? There's many businesses in the area who rely on vehicular deliveries. How should we think how those deliveries are coming in and out of the neighborhood? How can we move those onto smaller or safer vehicles? And how can we really improve that experience on the curb? And how can we better connect the area's residents to mass transit? And to speak a bit about our third topic here, open space and waterfront access. When it comes to waterfront properties, the Department of City Planning has a few core elements in its toolkit. We're going to talk through those as we go. First off, in the area that we're looking at, the context area more broadly, there are 62 acres of open space. The Parks Department assesses a metric called the walk to park gap to understand where investments in park space may be most urgently needed. In this map, the areas in green, with the green overlay, are within a 5-minute walk of a small community park or within a 10-minute walk of a larger park. You can visualize the gaps in access to green space where the green overlay has holes on the map. You see that, for example, where the Sunnyside Yards label is, also in parts of Sunnyside, parts of Dutch Kills. This metric is not everything, and it doesn't always account for a park's accessibility or a park's quality or how many people rely on the park. The advocacy group New Yorkers for Parks assesses the amount of park space available per resident in its analyses. In these terms, LIC falls below the citywide average. They note that the Queens Community Board 2, which covers the majority of the study area, has about 0.3 acres of park space per 1,000 residents. That's compared to 1.8 acres of park space per 1,000 residents when looked at citywide. Along the shoreline, the city can require a waterfront public access area when it changes its zoning. One method to allow for new open space along the shoreline is this waterfront public access area, or WPAA. These typically require that some portion of the property along the water, generally 15 to 20%, is held for public access. Through this method, the city can work with private developers to create new open and green space that's accessible publicly. A few components that are common to these plans include: 1, the visual connection from the inland public street to the waterfront, which emphasizes the fact that the area is publicly accessible. 2, thinking through how best to create the upland connection that goes alongside the building and brings people to the water. And 3, how the shoreline walkway and any additional public green space alongside the building work together to serve the public. The city has thought through some of these conditions particular to this area in LIC in the Northern Hunters Point Waterfront Access Plan, WAP. The Waterfront Access Plan sets a framework for the bulk and the site coverage regulations for properties that are along the water to allow for this public access and open space. This plan is outdated. It's from 1997, and this community planning process is an opportunity to update it to today's needs. It's an opportunity to learn from some past and interim projects since its last release, and also to include our greater understanding of the impacts of climate change and the tools that we now have to address them. So far in this process, we've heard from participants who voiced desire for more public and civic spaces that are accessible to all and that bring people together. We've had a few people highlight the places that they love in the neighborhood today, like that kind of funky little open space at the 12th Street Glacial Rock. We heard ideas for open spaces and boat access along the East River. And we also hear you on the need for more public restrooms, both here in Long Island City and all around the city. And finally, a few questions to consider as we get into conversation just after this. Where do you see potential opportunities for open space, especially inland areas that aren't along the coast? As you may have heard, the waterfront is certainly an area of focus. However, we want to know your creative ideas for creating additional open space in places that don't lie along the water. What kind of activities would you like to happen in open spaces? How would you program them? Do you want them to be for passive relaxation? Do you want basketball courts? Do you want, dare I say, pickleball courts? And what existing concerns do you have about the state of the parks in the area? All right, folks, thanks very much for listening as we talk through some of the issues, some of the things to keep in mind for getting into today's discussion groups. We're now going to break out into discussion. Before we do, a few points to keep in mind and a few agreements we'll ask everybody to please share. First off, please share the airtime in discussion. Be cognizant if you've spoken a lot, and take a step back to allow others to join the conversation if you have. Please be respectful of the diverse viewpoints and the experiences of the people in the room. Together, we know a lot, but individually, no one of us knows everything. To that end, please use I statements and try to speak from your own experience. In my experience, I have noticed when I encounter this helps us just avoid generalizations that may be true for you, but may not be true for everybody who experiences the thing. And then finally, please check your negativity bias. It can be easy in spaces like this where we don't personally know some of the folks in the room to quickly shoot down other folks' ideas. Take a beat before you do, think through, come back with questions, come back with your curiosity about why somebody brought up a topic or why they think something may be a good idea. A little bit about the format. So as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, there's going to be 3 breakout discussion groups today. They are each going to be focused on one of these different topics. Breakout room 1 is going to be focused on climate adaptation and resilience. Breakout room 2 on transportation and mobility. Breakout room 3 on open space and waterfront access. And the main room, if you need interpretation, please stay in the main room and we will be doing language interpretation in the main room for discussion. Otherwise, we ask everybody to please select and join one of these different breakout rooms to start. If you're interested in discussing more than one of these topics, you are absolutely welcome to, and we encourage you to switch breakout rooms whenever you want to throughout the discussion. We're also going to be using a tool called Google Jamboard, which will be a visual aid as we're talking through this. It'll also be the place where we're taking live notes so you can see how we're recording comments. We'll also be dropping the link directly to the Jamboard in the chat for your breakout room. If you wish to put your comments in directly, you are absolutely welcome to do that. You are not required, however. If you are uncomfortable using Jamboard, it's totally all right. Just share your comments verbally or in the chat, and we'll ensure that they make it into the Jamboard itself. And then as one more thing on this last slide, in the first part of the breakout room discussions, we'll be workshopping issues and opportunities. And in the latter part, we'll be working together to develop community-defined goals for that topic area. As we talk through issues and opportunities, we'll ask you to do so in this framework. Share anything, but this is a framework to help us make sense of what folks are bringing into the conversation. On the upper left hand of this quadrant, you see what are there potential for in this area? Where do you see opportunities? We also want to know where you see things that may be missing as it relates to the topic area from Long Island City as it exists today. We want to know where you see challenges or barriers to implementation or issues that you want to see addressed in the neighborhood. And we want to know what you love already about Long Island City, what you want to safeguard, what you want to ensure remains as the neighborhood goes through this planning process. So a note about joining the breakout groups. Since this is topic by topic and we are inviting folks to select their own topics, you do have to manually enter the breakout room. You do that by clicking the icon that looks like this in the lower part of your Zoom window. It is a 2x2 square grid. It says breakout rooms. When you click that, you'll see a pop-up come up that allows you to join a group based on what we're talking about in that room. If at any point, like I said, you want to leave room and switch, you can hit leave in the bottom right-hand corner. Just make sure when you do hit leave, you click leave breakout room and you don't click leave meeting because you will leave the whole Zoom meeting. Of course, if you accidentally do that, you're welcome to rejoin the Zoom and rejoin whichever room you want to get into. So with that, we are now going to break into breakout points that were shared out each of the different discussion rooms. We're going to go through a bit of a summary now. And so I am going to start off. I think I'm going to start off with nope, I'm not. I'm going to start off with open space and waterfront. And so for that room, I am going to invite, I believe it was, let's see, was that Lucy? Was that you taking notes?
Yeah, I would say that we had a really great conversation that touched on issues, opportunities, and ideas. There's a clear amount of potential that people recognize in the open space, and also open space to serve as something where we talk about resiliency solutions going in. Also, a lot of barriers identified, not just in our formalized open spaces, but in our sidewalks and our streets as well. Something that came up a little bit later in the conversation was recognizing that construction can be a barrier to great pedestrian access to open spaces and just in the neighborhood. And certainly talking about this area's waterfront location and the flooding conditions that we saw from storms like last night's, today's. We looked at things that are currently missing from the area. And certainly noting that there were voices who we wanted to have in the room who we noted weren't present. And specifically that Dutch Kills to the north is a space that got called out as really one of those lacks in a walk to a park. And noting, and additionally in the safeguards area, that we have great existing parks in this area that are actually maxed out. So we need to look at what are our other opportunities here. Would you like us also to talk about the goals conversation? Do my best to summarize that.
Yeah.
Tall order. There was a lot of great discussion in this group. So you'll see that some of these ideas repeated from our previous page, but we talked a lot about the role of what developers might be able to do in terms of creating new open spaces. What opportunities does that present? What are the limitations on it? What are some potential mechanisms that could work for that? Also about, what is the role of the city? Multiple city agencies need to come to the table in order to make this dream of a continuous waterfront open public space to happen. And that community members have already identified specific spaces that they think are ripe for improvement, and also other spaces in the area that they think could have treatment to become new open spaces. I'll leave it at that because I know we've got other groups to get through, but I think our team is going to have a great time digging into all the information that members of the community have given us on this topic today.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for sharing out from the open space group a little bit about what you discussed. All right, I'm going to now turn it over to Derek to talk us through the transportation and mobility group's discussion.
Hi, yes, thank you, Bahij, and thank you everyone for joining our transportation and mobility discussion today. We covered a lot of both strengths and things that we would like to see. One of the things that was noted was the existing transportation infrastructure and the present strong presence of rail infrastructure specifically that in some cases may be underutilized and could benefit from an expansion of transit service utilizing existing infrastructure without necessarily having to build completely new infrastructure in all cases. People expressed the desire to see a lot of improvement in other aspects as well, pedestrian infrastructure, including pedestrianized streets, improved walking infrastructure. They address some hostile walking conditions such as traffic violence and desolate streetscapes. They also wanted to see improved bicycle infrastructure, an expansion of bike lanes and improvement of the existing bike lanes, as well as an existing improvement of the existing bus lanes and expansion of the existing bus lanes, and beyond, as well as a holistic connectivity between all of the different transit modes throughout the area. As well as there was also some comments on signage wayfinding and as also some comments on parking and the ensuring the adequate parking space as new development expands, as well as some concerns over the footprint of existing car infrastructure as we head closer and closer to climate change.
Thank you so much, Derek. Do you want to share out anything about goals?
Yeah, you can hop over to the next page. We have some notes on goals here. There was a lot of emphasis on accessibility, and as well as a holistic approach to addressing all the different various transit modes. So without putting too much emphasis on any single transit mode, so buses, trains, ferries, bikes, walking, driving, and also connectivity between each various transit modes. One of the things that was mentioned multiple times was connection between buses and ferry stations.
Thank you so much, Derek, talking us through some of the multimodal goals we heard in your group, some of the connections folks want to see. I am now going to turn it over to the note taker who was in my room, Linda, to talk us through a bit of our discussion around climate adaptation and resiliency.
Thank you, Vahid. I think one of the main things that came up right at the beginning was the need to preserve Lake Vernon as a potential site for future climate resiliency measures, and also the need to hire the needed expertise to foster a green economy, and the need for the upgrades to sewer infrastructure, especially with the growth that is expected from the rezoning. There is a call for more interagency collaboration and the need from the public to understand the existing conditions better so that they can provide the appropriate feedback. There has been also talks about taking into consideration the increased number of toilets, for example, because of the expected growth and the effect of that on sewer infrastructure. One of the suggestions was separate sewer systems. Preserving the existing waterfront space and expanding it is another idea that came up, with focusing on a tree canopy, especially on the waterfront, because of the reflective nature of that area. Yeah, I guess we can move on to the next board. As for like what climate adaptation resiliency goals people want to achieve, the plan to achieve, one of the suggestions was thinking about capturing carbon and returning it to the soil as a new idea that we haven't heard before, incentivizing green roofs and the adaptive reuse of buildings as well. There has been also talks about the Queensbridge houses and how any climate resiliency actions on the waterfront would affect this area, and how to take that into consideration since this area is outside of the study of the rezoning area. Talks about incentives for private developments and also concerns about how do we achieve these goals without the need to how do we have measures set within the city's framework to achieve these goals without relying heavily on private developments.
Thank you, Linda, so much for that summary of what was discussed in the Climate Adaptation and Resilience Group. Folks, thank you all so much for joining the conversation at this evening's focus area meeting, as well as the focus area meetings of weeks past. I think I have just one closing slide for us all, and that is that we ask you to stay connected with us as we continue this planning work. And that means going to licplan.nyc and signing up for email updates there. We are very excited to jump into the room, the physical space, not the Zoom room, but be in the same room with you all for our next round of focus area meetings. Those are going to be in the area, and we're excited to see you there. They'll be coming up in late January and early February. We are going to announce the dates and locations for those meetings soon. The way you'll find out about those is on the plan's website. It'll also be on DCP, Department of City Planning, social media. So please do look out for that next round of meetings. We'll be very excited to come back with you with some refined plan goals based on the discussions that we've had so far in these focus area meetings. And we have a much better built out set of issues and opportunities thanks to these conversations. We're going to be using that round of meetings to dig into the strategies that we actually want to include as recommendations in this community plan. So I do want to just echo, thank you all for coming out and participating in this process. Thank you to the staff from city agencies who have volunteered their time on evenings and weekends so that we can have these conversations in community with you all. Thank you to the Department of City Planning for organizing this process with us, and also for Councilmember One's office for leading this conversation in the community. I think that's all. Thank you, Zoom, for hosting the meeting. All right, folks. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next month as we continue these conversations. And once again, thank you all.
Thanks, Paige. Bye.